Hello, my name is Marco from Culiacan. Let's learn together the memory verse from Lesson 4 found in Joshua chapter 10, verse 14. And there was no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. God bless you.
Crossing the Jordan marked the beginning of a new stage in the history of Israel. The promised land was within reach, but before them stood Jericho, an imposing, fortified city. It was the first great obstacle on the path to conquest. Humanly speaking, Israel had no chance. They had no advanced weapons or military experience. They were a people who, until recently, had wandered through the desert, guided more by the cloud and the fire than by war strategies. Yet, in this uncertain setting, God chose to reveal himself to Joshua in a way that would transform his understanding of leadership in battle. The appearance of the commander of the Lord's army was not a simple heavenly visit. It was a divine manifestation, a decisive encounter that changed Joshua's perspective. He had gone out to inspect the land, perhaps looking for a plan or an opportunity, but God showed him that the true strategy did not come from human analysis, but from spiritual obedience. The question Joshua asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" was answered with one word that dismantled all human logic: no. With that answer, God reminded him that the battle was not his, but the Lord's. This encounter teaches that the battles of God's people are not fought merely with human resources but under the direct command of the heavenly commander. Victory is not secured by numbers or weapons but by the presence of the God of hosts. That same commander who revealed himself to Joshua continues guiding his people today amid the spiritual conflicts of this generation. Welcome, my name is Augusto Palacios and this is Studying the Lesson. Sunday, October 19th. The commander of the Lord's armies. The scene described in Joshua chapter 5 verses 13 to 15 introduces us to a moment that is both deeply spiritual and strategically significant. Israel was in enemy territory, only steps away from their first great battle, but God would not allow Joshua's leadership to advance without first being reoriented. Heaven itself descended to the battlefield. The visitor with the drawn sword symbolized God's readiness to intervene directly on behalf of his people, but on his own terms. Joshua was not facing a common messenger but Christ in his pre-incarnate form, who reminded him that victory is not won by strength but by holiness and obedience. When Joshua asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" he revealed a tension that we all face, the tendency to view circumstances from a human perspective. We want God to join our plans when the correct posture is to join his. The divine answer, no, shatters every self-centered vision of mission. It is not about asking God to bless our strategies but about surrendering to his. Joshua, a man of faith and action, had to learn that even courage must be guided by obedience. In that moment, he understood that he was not the supreme commander of Israel but a servant under the orders of the true commander, the Lord of heavenly hosts. Joshua's act of bowing in worship confirmed that he understood who was standing before him. No angel would have accepted such reverence. Book of Revelation chapter 22 verses 8 and 9. This commander was God himself, the same who had appeared to Abraham, to Moses, and to the prophets. His presence on the border of Canaan meant that the conquest was not a political or territorial issue but a spiritual one. Every battle represented an extension of the great conflict between good and evil. In other words, Jericho was not just a city to be conquered, it was the first visible field of an invisible war. The heavenly commander ordered Joshua to remove his sandals, just as Moses had done before the burning bush. Both scenes share the same message: true victory begins on holy ground in communion with God. Before fighting, one must worship. Before conquering, one must kneel. God does not seek impetuous warriors but humble leaders who understand that divine power acts when the human heart is fully surrendered. The holy ground of God's presence is the starting point of every victorious mission. This story also reveals the nature of spiritual leadership. Joshua did not receive a military plan but a spiritual instruction, to recognize God's authority and consecrate himself to him. Human power without divine direction only brings defeat. Israel would soon learn that the conquest of Canaan did not depend on catapults or swords but on faith in the commands of a God who goes before his people. The walls would fall not by force but through obedience. That is how the kingdom of God operates. The impossible becomes real when his people trust and act according to his word. Comparing this passage with the second book of Kings chapter 6 verses 8 to 17, reveals that the armies of God are not merely earthly. When Elisha's servant saw the enemy surrounding them, he panicked, but the prophet prayed, "Lord, open his eyes so that he may see." Then he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire around them. That heavenly vision echoes the same message Joshua received: the army of the Lord surrounds, protects, and fights for his people. If our spiritual eyes were opened, we too would see that heavenly forces are still active today, battling for those who remain faithful. The books of Isaiah chapter 37 verse 16 and Nehemiah chapter 9 verse 6 confirm that this commander is the creator of the heavens, the heavenly hosts, and the earth. He commands not only men but myriads of angels who serve with power and precision. The Bible calls him the Lord of Hosts, a title that expresses both his sovereignty over the cosmos and his commitment to the redeemed. This understanding changes our perspective on prayer and mission. We do not fight alone or depend on our strength. Every time we invoke his name, all heaven moves on our behalf. Joshua's encounter invites us to reflect on how we face our own spiritual battles. There are moments when, like him, we look upon the walls of our personal Jerichos, impossible situations, fears, trials, crises, without realizing that the commander is already there. Instead of asking God to be on our side, we must make sure we are on his side. That difference redefines faith, not as demand but as surrender. On the holy ground of commitment, God reveals his perfect strategy. Ultimately, the figure of the heavenly commander points to Christ, who still leads his people's spiritual war today. He is the one who marched ahead through the Jordan, who triumphed at Calvary, and who will return as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Book of Revelation chapter 19 verses 11 to 16. Every battle we face, every challenge we go through, is part of a greater conflict in which Christ himself is involved. Therefore, when we bow in worship and obedience, we are not surrendering to the enemy but aligning ourselves with the God who never loses a battle. The commander of the Lord's armies did not appear only before Joshua, he appears before us as well. His words still echo, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." Every time we recognize his presence, every time we worship before acting, heaven opens, the walls tremble, and victory draws near. The conquest of Canaan was not the triumph of a human army but the manifestation of the power of a God who fights for his people. And that same commander continues marching ahead of us today, opening paths, tearing down walls, and leading us toward final victory. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X. Sunday to Friday you'll find 2 daily questions, posted at 2 p.m. and 8 p.m., designed to help us reinforce what we learn and open space for dialogue. Your comments are very valuable and always enrich our study. Join the conversation and share your thoughts with our community.